Mark Passio, what is gun control?
A gun control is the restraint by the ruling class and or their enforcers to coercively and violently restrain the natural inherent right of self-defense with firearms from the people who they consider that they have the right to rule over. And it is a coercive, violent behavior because it actually initiates harm against someone else's property, namely their right of self-defense.
Larkin, help us get through this euphemism here. What does gun control really mean? We have Justin Trudeau yesterday saying that I hereby declare all military grade weapons illegal. Of course, not for the state, a monopoly for the state. Larkin, what does gun control really mean? Help us get to the heart of it.
Almost everything that government does, it uses euphemisms for, and it dishonestly describes. Gun control is a shining example. It's this nice sounding, oh, we're sort of limiting something scary or something. It is, the accurate term is basically peasant disarmament. It's the ruling class, because they never apply it to themselves. It's the ruling class saying, and even this skips part of it, you're not allowed to have guns at all, or certain guns, or certain kinds of guns. And by not allowed to, they mean if we catch you doing this, we will send men with guns to come capture you for disobeying us. So gun control is literally a form of gun violence, immoral in every way, because it is 100% aggression and immoral to tell someone for merely possessing that thing, I and my thugs with their guns am going to come, capture and cage you. It's the irony is that what is called gun control is literally a vicious, immoral example of gun violence.
Mark Passio has an excellent video called The True Meaning and Purpose of the Second Amendment. Mark, I'm curious, why do you oppose gun control? Isn't it just about helping people and making sure we as a society are safe and cooperative?
Not at all. It's about creating a power differential between the ruling class and the rest of the people. And that's what government always seeks to do, to enhance its own power at the cost of the average individual and their rights and freedom. I'm opposed to it because I understand that each individual has the inherent right to defend themselves from coercion and violence, so long as they are not initiating harm against another sentient being. And what gun control is, as Larkin said, is the initiation of violence by the people who are doing the bidding of the ruling class to actually, conduct violence against peaceful people simply for owning a piece of equipment. If an individual doesn't have the right to perform an action, the action cannot be delegated or granted to any other individual or group and thereby magically turn a wrongdoing into a right. There is no such thing as the delegation of a wrong, So if an individual would not have the right to go and seize forcibly and coercively and violently someone else's property, that right cannot be granted to any other individual or group of people and then called a right. See, we all have the same natural inherent rights, and included in those same natural inherent rights that each individual has, and no one has any more or less than anyone else, is the right to defend your physical self, your physical being, your property, your rights and your freedom from the initiation of aggression by others.
Now, Larkin, how can you not support gun control? For heaven's sake, the U.S. is this gun-toting place, and that's why there's so much gun violence, 30,000 a year. Larkin, how can you seriously oppose gun control?
First of all, because it is gun violence, like I explained before, and I oppose people using guns for bad things. So much of the way statists think and voters think and the way government functions is like a teacher and little kids. Like the teacher saying, well, you little kids, when you're in my classroom, you're not allowed to have guns. You're not allowed to do this. Like, we're grown-ups. The notion that a politician should A, have a whole bunch of armed guards himself, and then B, should tell the rest of us, you're not allowed to have what my thugs have every day and will use on you if you disobey me, because you're just kids and it's too scary, it's too risky, you're too unstable. for anyone to accept that view is basically for them to accept the fact that they're either a helpless child or a slave or both. And gun control is completely founded on the notion that the masters have the right to decide for us what we are allowed to possess in order to defend ourselves from, from criminals, from invaders, or from the master himself. And at the end of the day, that is the only reason they ever push gun control, because if you had human livestock, would you want it to have guns?
Mark Passio, do you not care about the thousands of Americans who die at the hands of gun violence?
Just because someone else initiates harm or aggression doesn't mean that other people lose their rights as a result. This is totally flawed logic that is often put out there by people who are advocates of ridiculous forms of violence like gun control. I would advocate that people learn how to defend themselves against the initiation of violence instead of trying to limit people from doing that. It's the idea that, if, let's say, a lion attacks a gazelle and they did it with teeth, that then you disarm and take all the teeth out of the gazelle so they have no ability to even bite their aggressor. That's what gun control is the equivalent of. It's basically saying, because there are bad people who might do violent things with firearms, let's take them away from the people and let them lose their ability to possibly defend themselves from such attacks. It's completely and utterly flawed logic. And again, as we've pointed out over and over again, it is a form of violence with guns, which we firmly stand against.
Exactly. And the 30,000 annually statistic is, first of all, a lie, because half of those are suicides. It's not violence if you do it to
That's
yourself, any more than me spending my own money is stealing from myself. And also, a lot of those are gang related. And government is the number one cause of mafias and gangs, because they outlaw things like gambling, drugs, prostitution, drive them underground. Just as there's no Al Capone today being violent with alcohol, there wouldn't be any if there wasn't a government pushing a drug war or any of these black markets. Larkin Rose, is there any other important message you would like to communicate about gun control you feel is not generally understood?
Well, I think there really is a trained-in immaturity to a lot of people. Now, in the U.S., there are a lot of exceptions to this. There are a lot of people in the U.S. who do take it upon themselves to realize, hey, I'm just as responsible as anybody else. If there's some scary person out there, why would I sit on my butt and hope authority saves the day? If I have a gun, if I have the means and the ability to go stop the bad guy, it's just as much my job as anybody else's. But there are also so many people in the country who have this immature notion that if we just sit tight and wait for authority to save us and protect us and tell us what we're allowed to have and what like, everything will turn out fine. And first of all, those people need to read a damn history book. But second of all, they literally need to grow up. People who believe in government literally need to grow up and realize this is the real world. There's other people, we're in this together, so to speak. And if you want yourself to be defended by somebody with a gun, which you do if you dial 911, here's a thought: have somebody with a gun already be at your house by having it be you. And the fact that so few people even think about that and realize that if you're going to cheer for the forcible protection of the innocent, why don't you just be one of the people who do that? You don't need a badge. You don't need a special authority. You need to grow up and be moral and responsible.
Another way they lie with statistics is saying, well, in 1996, Australia had a gun ban and everything went fine. Violence has decreased. What they don't tell you is the 7 years prior, gun violence was also on the fall, and they use a 7-year period from about 96 to 2003. Violence in Australia fell about 22%. In the US, in that same 7-year period, gun violence fell 29%. So this is how the world was just, for whatever reason, you can't say that was as a causal result of the gun confiscation bill. So that's why it's so important to not hear a statistic, go do a bunch of research, and then find out that the person was just using it as a stalling tactic. We got to get down to the principles. Mark, and one other thing. It's like, does government not also kill innocent people with guns? I mean, every criticism of, well, but innocent people will die if civilians have guns. Have governments ever killed civilians? I don't know, Eric Garner Waco, World War I, World War II, Vietnam War, King Leopold. Like there's there's all these examples. Mark Passio, final thoughts on gun control.
Those who advocate for gun control are advocates of violence. And people never really look at it that way. They think that they're doing the right thing, but what they are actually saying is, we believe that a special class of people who magically have more rights than other people do have the right to come and coercively and violently suppress other people's rights with gun violence. I mean, imagine that. That's what the people who are advocates of gun control actually believe, and yet still believe that they are good people, quote unquote. They're
Now,
advocates of violence.
yeah.